today in South Carolina. The candidates and their surrogates out in full force here. Sanders campaigning with local leaders, as well as the rapper Killer Mike. And that was about a mile away from where we are right now. We'll get into that tonight. Joe Biden, meanwhile, benefiting from the ultimate endorsement you can get in South Carolina, James Clyburn, who's also warning quite bluntly of what he sees as the risk of a Bernie Sanders ticket to the Democratic House. New polling showing Biden up here. He's also drawing more fundraising, which could be a key lifeline for a national race, which we all know really begins in earnest on Super Tuesday. Tomorrow could determine whether some candidates like Biden, Klobuchar, and Tom Steyer can provide the proof that they still have a path to this nomination. A slumping finish here for some of them could doom their quest to try to prove to Democrats they are the alternative to Bernie Sanders. A strong finish, though, for any of those might change the shape of this race. We should also note that Sanders still is the person holding that delegate lead. So with 54 delegates up for grabs here, he could finish second and still have the bigger overall lead in the whole race, bigger than he has today. We're going to get into all this right now with my panel, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Jonathan Capehart, South Carolina State Representative Justin Bamberg, a Sanders supporter, and former executive director of the South Carolina Democratic Party, Amanda Loveday. She's a senior advisor to a super PAC that is a supporter of Joe Biden. Thanks to all you for being here.
Thanks.
We're going to get to the surrogates, but starting with a journalist who's followed so many of these races, what do you see in this pivotal homestretch right now?
Well, what's interesting is the poll numbers. Before Congressman Clyburn's endorsement of Vice President Biden, we started seeing polls come out, Clemson University and others, showing that the gap between Vice President Biden and Senator Sanders isn't 5 points, isn't in single digits, it's in double digits. It's in a range that people had come to expect to happen between Biden and Sanders. Then the Clyburn endorsement hits. It's emotional, it's powerful, and we will find out tomorrow whether it's effective. And then the other thing that's happened, I think, that is probably wind underneath the vice president's sails, was a story that came out that talked about the difference between the polls and the actual vote, the actual win. And the wins have always been much greater than the final poll. And so if you're Vice President Biden, you're hoping that past his prologue, that happens to him, that the vote total he gets is bigger than the latest polls that have come out, that Congressman Clyburn, the legendary Congressman Clyburn, his endorsement will be that push that he needs for not just South Carolina, but also Super Tuesday. Because as much as we talk about the importance of the African-American vote here in South Carolina, and it is super important since African-Americans are 60% of the Democratic electorate, there are other states on Super Tuesday that also have significant African-American voting populations that could stand, their votes could inure to the vice president's benefit.
Well, and you're pointing out that Biden has evidence of doing better here, and yet it was doing worse when he was doing worse when people said they finally heard some fight from him. Everyone knows Barack Obama's style. He is chill, and he does well when he's chilling. There's a lot of people who feel, Amanda, that Biden, when he was chilling, it wasn't working. And they like the fight. And I talked to voters today who said, it seems like he's getting back up off the mat. Take a quick listen to Joe Biden hitting Bernie Sanders.
The fact that someone lists himself as an official independent, not even a Democrat, except to run for the office of president, and then lists himself as a socialist, that doesn't fly here. All I know is I'm going to run hard to help down-ballot folks win.
Is he looking better with voters here as he actually doesn't take anything for granted and fights for his political life?
Absolutely. There's two pieces that are going to give him the momentum he needs to win big tomorrow. First is this continuous effort of his. He did well in Nevada. He did well at the debate. He did well at his town hall, and he got Jim Clyburn's endorsement. I mean, that is a list that any politician would dream of. Second is he is continuously going out there and showing confidence. He is steady. He's on message. It's something that South Carolina voters and voters across the country have been waiting for. And it's here, and he's the candidate that we've been hoping to see for months.
Justin?
I think Bernie Sanders is making way big ground here. Okay, this isn't 2016. There are African-American voters in particular in South Carolina who understand that Vice President Joe Biden is not Barack Obama. Obviously, Barack Obama can't win the presidency if he picks a vice president that is exactly like him. African-American voters in general, in the Democratic Party are fired up about Senator Sanders. Joe Biden seems to have lost a step, so to speak. I think we've seen it as the Vice President of the United States. He should be performing better in every state than he has been doing. Think about it, right? 2016, we were talking Hillary and Bernie, and the talk was, oh, Hillary's going to hit 70% of the vote, Bernie's going to get 30. We're talking about, what, 10 points at this point? Joe Biden is the only candidate who could, quote unquote, win in South Carolina and still lose at the same time. Bernie Sanders is going to perform extremely well here. He's going to be competitive, and I think that the numbers are going to surprise a lot of people in this state.
And we are seeing the outlines of a debate at times between Sanders and Biden. And we have brand new reporting I want to share. This was, as mentioned, just about a mile from where we are right now at the Bernie Sanders rally. And I spoke to several voters. I want to play one voter in particular, a young voter, who was telling us about discussing with his parents their vote here in South Carolina and about voting for Biden or Sanders.
My parents live in South Carolina, so I came to visit them.
Are they going to vote tomorrow?
Yes, they are going to vote tomorrow.
Have you had the conversation?
I had a conversation with them months ago. They were more Biden in the beginning, but they weren't really following, the race. I mean, they just know Biden, Obama, and that's what it was. But I kind of had to, pull them along, tug them along into knowing, hey, guys, this is what Bernie stands for. This is why this is going to be important. My mother is battling with MS. She's doing okay right now. No, thank you. She's doing okay right now. It was two. It was the education and healthcare together. Like, hey, Mom, you always talked about, and now I'm going through student loans right now. You've always talked about, the student loans and how unaffordable college is for so many people. This is our time to make a difference, to say, to help people, especially people from a lot of our community. We want to help everyone, but people from our community, we struggle so much.
Do you know who they're voting for tomorrow?
Yes, I do. Bernie Sanders.
That's one that your side won. What do you think of that conversation with his own parents?
Well, that's what you're seeing in this state, right? A lot of the, say, older African Americans are more inclined to maybe lean towards Joe Biden because that's what they're familiar with. But the younger generation, they are rocking extra hard with Bernie Sanders right now, including in the black community. And the younger people are talking to their grandparents, talking to their parents. And the parents are inclined to listen to their kids because their kids are the future. We're going to see people turn out for Bernie Sanders unlike what people are expecting. It's not going to be anything like 2016.
Yeah. Well, Amanda, I want to get your counter argument because that's just one story, obviously. That's you just heard the argument from one, South Carolina parents there that he's trying to basically lobby, and he made the case pulling them from Biden to Sanders. What would your counter argument be? Because, by the way, they could be watching the votes tomorrow. What would you say?
Well, first I want to mention something that Justin said, and obviously we're friends before we are foes. So to the difference between the Hillary Clinton and the Bernie Sanders primary and what's happening tomorrow is there were two candidates on the ballot in 2016. So the 100% of the vote had to be split between two. Now you have numerous candidates on the ballot, and so you have to have a number of votes going to other moderates who are appearing on the ballot in South Carolina and also on Super Tuesday and into March. So you're never going to see the spread you saw from a Hillary Clinton Bernie Sanders primary in 2020. But what you are going to see is all of the moderates' numbers adding up to look more like a Hillary Clinton number, showing that the Democratic Party is hoping to get a moderate on the ticket rather than a Democratic socialist.
And I would just say this, that we cannot have this conversation in a vacuum. President Trump is the person who African-American voters and all voters are looking at defeating. If there's one thing that unites Democrats, it's getting rid of Donald Trump. And talking to my own black family.
All right, well, go ahead.
And I'm going to throw this to the black people here in the audience. After watching that, I'm thinking, yeah, he's lobbying his parents, but those parents, and particularly my relatives, they are focused on getting rid of Trump. They look at all the candidates and they're looking at the person who's the one who can beat him. It's not just familiarity. Yeah, my Aunt Gloria loves Joe Biden. My mom is leaning to Mike Bloomberg. They are wide-eyed about the racial implications and everything. but they want him gone. And so I'm looking at, there are to your point about older African Americans listening to their kids, there are some older African Americans who look at their kids and say, yeah, baby, that's, I hear what you're saying. And then they're going to go into the voting booth and vote their conscience, vote their fears, vote their hopes and aspirations. And so that's why I think what will be fascinating to see is the generational divide. Is it really there? Will the younger voters who are tending towards Senator Sanders, are they going to come out in the numbers that make their voices heard, that swamps the older generation who they're trying to persuade?
Well, you tee it up. You tee it up as such a big question, and luckily we're going to hear from some of the people in the room in reaction later this hour. And that really also goes to whether South Carolina and the more diverse states, which is the path to Democrats winning the presidency. It cannot be done without the diverse coalition, what is sometimes called the Obama coalition. Does the turnout on Saturday show those paths or not, which is what you're laying out. I also want to play for everyone the candidates themselves in these closing arguments over the last 24 hours in South Carolina.
We have to invite everybody we can into the tent. And I will insist on being a president for everybody.
We are building a movement that cannot be stopped. And when millions of people stand up and fight back, nothing on earth can stop us.
Folks, it matters who we elect and what they stand for. So let's start by getting rid of Donald Trump.
Look, I'm here because my name is Elizabeth Warren, and I'm the woman who's going to beat Donald Trump. Woo! And I think South Carolina is ready for some big structural change.
Jonathan Capehart, that brings us to some of these other players. We obviously have some candidate leaders here, and we have more later this hour, including a Warren surrogate. But Tom Steyer, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, where do they fit in? And is this really pressure on them now if they don't do well tomorrow?
Oh, if they don't do well tomorrow, some of them can make the argument, all of them actually can make the argument that they have to stay in the race past Super Tuesday. Massachusetts isn't Super Tuesday. Minnesota, Super Tuesday. California, Super Tuesday. Steyer, Warren, Klobuchar. But once those results come in, those three and some of the others are going to have a serious conversation with themselves about how possible, how feasible, and how are their campaigns, and how viable are they? And I would argue some of them would need to get out of the race, if only to make it possible for someone to counter Senator Sanders, if there is truly the moderate wing with all these candidates, and then Senator Sanders, if they really want someone to overcome Senator Sanders, who is that going to be? They're all going to make the argument that they are the one. I interviewed Tom Steyer today. He thinks he's the one. I interviewed Mayor Pete in Charleston on Monday. He thinks he's the one because he's actually beaten Bernie Sanders, delegate-wise, in Iowa. So I wouldn't want to be any of these candidates because it's going to be look in the mirror time. And what's more important, your political future or the future of the party and the country?
Well, and that's the other thing that goes well beyond tomorrow, right? But is so important to the point you raised earlier. And we hear it over and over. People say, look, get it together. A lot of Democrats telling us they see Donald Trump as a threat that only gets worse if he's reelected, given how far he's pushed, and that he basically admitted to trying to extort foreign election help, that he is blowing up the Justice Department, something we cover here. But when you mention the path, the Massachusetts story is a fascinating one. Elizabeth Warren has always been very popular there, and people may still see her as a very popular figure to lead in the Senate.
Right.
But look at these new numbers, which I want to flag. Some people here, brand new, may not have seen them. There in Massachusetts now, state polling has Sanders at 25%, Warren trailing at 17. You know, that's not where you want to be in your home state.
Right.
And then you mentioned the Block Sanders movement. I want to get the representative on this. New York Times saying in interviews with dozens of Democratic officials, including 93 superdelegates, and you know they think they're super, overwhelming opposition to handing Mr. Sanders the nomination, quote, if he falls short of the, quote, majority of delegates. Is that something that the campaign here and elsewhere is thinking about, or it's not time for that yet?
You know, I think there's a problem here, right? And there's a problem with the Democratic Party. I'll say it. All right, we're supposed to be a party of the people. It's obvious. Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and we're going to see South Carolina Saturday. The people are with Bernie Sanders. I've never seen a champion lose in the first round of the playoffs and run around and say, I need to be the NBA champion.
So what's the Sanders campaign message to these superdelegates who are out in the press now putting this shade on the campaign and saying we might stop you at the convention. What's your message back?
Well, the message is this, are you there to listen to yourself, or are you there to listen to the people of the United States of America? All right? This isn't the Republican Party. The GOP in South Carolina, people wanted to challenge Trump. They canceled their primary. We don't do that in the Democratic Party. So, no, let the people decide.
Yeah, and I think we might hear more and more about that. I've got a lot more in the show, so I want to thank Jonathan Capehart, Representative Justin Bamberg, and Amanda Loveday supporting Joe Biden. Thank you so much. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.